Executive leadership and sponsorship is one of the most important success factors for digital transformation. However, a lot of executives don't understand what it means and they don't understand the extent of how they need to be involved. So what exactly do executives need to do and what are their roles on a digital transformation? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And one of the things that I do personally with our clients and our project teams is I will advise their executive team on what they need to do to be successful as an organization. And I do this for our larger clients especially. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that executives don't often understand what it means to be an executive leader on a project like this. Some think they can delegate the project to other team members. Some think that all they have to do is sign the check and approve the project. Others think that they just need to report back or check back on the team once the project's completed. So what I want to do today is demystify what it means to be an executive on a project, and more specifically, what it means to be an effective leader on a digital transformation project. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology-agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America, as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. One of the first roles that's really important to understand as an executive is your role as an executive steering committee team member. And one of the first things that executive steering committee team members are tasked with is ensuring that there's justification for the project and ultimately approving the project for the organization. Now, obviously, the steering committee's role doesn't begin and end with the justification. It also entails keeping an eye on the project as the project evolves. So generally speaking, project teams will typically meet with the steering committee to provide an update on where the project is, share the major risks and issues that the team is facing, as well as give a status update on budgetary tracking, as well as the overall timelines and just how the overall project is evolving. The executive steering committee is generally comprised of the executive team in general. You generally want to make sure you have someone from IT, but more importantly, you want the executive leadership from different parts of the business. So you might have your CFO or your controller involved. You might have the head of manufacturing or your COO involved. You might have your head of supply chain involved. So essentially what you want on this executive steering committee is representation from all different parts of your business and basically involve the people that are responsible at the executive level for the entire organization in addition to the digital transformation project. Now, to be perfectly candid, this is probably the role that executives most commonly understand and that intuitively makes sense. They know that they have to approve the project. They know that they need to get an update on the project, and they know that they might have to hold some people accountable and make an occasional decision here and there. But it's the other stuff beyond the executive steering committee where executives get stuck. And oftentimes they overlook some of these other areas. And that's what I want to talk about through the rest of this video. Now, the executive steering committee is one aspect of how executives need to be involved. And again, that's the one that's most commonly understood. There's also the executive sponsor role. And generally speaking, the executive sponsor is also part of the executive steering committee. So you might have your COO, your CFO, or your CIO, or some combination thereof as the executive sponsor. Now, one of the challenges here is oftentimes organizations don't know who to make the executive sponsor, and oftentimes they don't end up designating one. They instead just defer to the executive steering committee, which is okay, you need the steering committee, but you do need to designate a single executive sponsor, ideally just one. Sometimes organizations will do two, but I would try to do one if you can. And I would also try to make sure it's not your CIO. And I mean no disrespect to CIOs out there that are watching this right now, but ultimately the executive sponsor should be someone from your business. Doesn't need to be your CEO, but it should be someone at the C-level or at the highest level ranks within your organization that represents the business. Where we've seen the most success with many of our clients is when whoever's the highest person within operations, so your chief operating officer, your head of supply chain, when someone like that is the executive sponsor, you're just going to have a different outcome than if you had a CIO or even a CFO involved. And the reason for that is because the COO generally understands broadly how the operations need to work within the organization. CFO might be too focused on finance and accounting and cost cutting and things of that nature. CIO might be too focused on the technology, and they may not have the same business credibility internally as the COO does. So that's why COO oftentimes makes sense. Now, of course, if you're implementing a specific solution or specific technology like an HR technology, then you'd want your chief HR officer to be the executive sponsor. If your implementation is just a finance and accounting system, then sure, make your CFO the executive sponsor. But to the extent that your digital transformation cuts across multiple functions and different disciplines within your business, you still need to designate that one executive sponsor that's sort of the main decision maker and that main point of contact at the executive level beyond the steering committee that can be that conduit between steering committee and the overall project team. So now that we know what the executive sponsor does and what the executive steering committee needs to do at a high level, let's talk about what their roles are. And the role of executives within a project start with project oversight. And that's one of the biggest functions that these team members need to focus on. And project oversight means making sure that you're tracking to the budget, making sure that we're tracking to the implementation timeline, making sure that we're managing risks and that we're identifying and mitigating those risks, making sure that what we're delivering as a project team is actually supporting and enabling our broader strategic goals and objectives. So there's a lot of oversight that comes with this, and not to say that we want our executive team to be micromanaging the project team, but the executive team should be more involved than what they typically intuitively are going to think they need to be involved. And if you think about all the different changes and decisions that need to be made during a transformation, that's why the executive steering committee and the executive team members need to be so involved in some of the day-to-day aspects of the project in terms of just making decisions, or at the very least validating decisions that are being made by the overall project team. And this one can also be tricky because oftentimes what happens is the project team is working with the system integrator and software vendor or vendors. And the software vendor and system integrators are often feeding the inputs to the project team that they will then deliver to the executive steering committee. And oftentimes that combination creates an overly optimistic view of how the project is going. So executives need to really trust but verify and dig in deeper and understand what exactly is happening in the project and do their own due diligence to identify potential risks that maybe the project team isn't identifying. Oftentimes the project team and the outside consultants get so close to the project that they miss the forest for the trees and they don't see the bigger picture of the potential risks that are happening within the project or the ways that the project might be getting a bit misaligned with the overall direction of the company. So that's a big part of how executive team members need to stay involved and provide that sort of oversight, not just to make sure we're on time, on budget, but also to make sure we manage risk and keep the overall team aligned. Anytime an organization goes through a digital transformation, whether it's an ERP implementation or supply chain implementation or any other sort of technology and business transformation initiative, there are major decisions that need to be made that will materially affect your business for years to come. So in other words, this is not just a technology deployment, this is a business change. Your processes are going to change, people's roles are going to change, jobs are going to change, the way you're organized is going to change. And let me rephrase that. They may not change, but they should change. I should clarify that point right there. And if they're not going to change, then chances are pretty high that you're investing a lot of money in technology that isn't going to improve your business. So if you want to get an ROI out of your investment in technology and you want to improve your business, you have to assume that you're going to have to make a lot of decisions around what the business is going to look like in the future. And you don't necessarily want your project team making all those decisions in a vacuum. It's not that you don't trust them, it's not that they're not capable, but oftentimes that vision for what the organization needs to look like in the future, that vision oftentimes should come from the top. It should be based on the overall strategy and the overall direction and the overall strategic pivots that the executive team is making. And that's why executives need to stay so well connected to the project, because they have to provide that guidance and direction and clarity for the project team. So organizational and operational decision-making is something that's very important. We always recommend that our clients have the project team maybe make some recommendations or provide some alternatives, but ultimately allow the executive team to make those decisions as part of their oversight role. Now, the final big role that executives should play in a digital transformation, if they want to be effective, is to ensure that there's organizational ownership and alignment. And this is the one that's the hardest to touch and see and feel, and it's the one that most commonly gets overlooked by executives. And what I mean by this is that they need to make sure that they're not becoming overly dependent on outside vendors and system integrators, for one. Too often, organizations don't know enough about digital transformation or technology initiatives, which is understandable. But what they do is, instead of building up their own competencies internally, they defer to the outside consultants. And the outside consultants will certainly fuel that, and they'll feed into it because they make more money by you doing that. So the executive's role is oftentimes to say, hey, time out, let's figure out a way to bring more of this work in-house so that we can enable our own team to be successful and to make decisions on behalf of the company, rather than a software vendor or a third-party technology consultant making the decisions on behalf of the company. And this is something that we advise our clients and coach our clients on every day, is to help them figure out how can they take more control of the project, more ownership of the project, and ensure that their teams are aligned. And I talked earlier in this video about how project teams oftentimes will get misaligned with the overall strategy and direction that the executives have in their own mind. And that's something else that the executive team needs to do, is make sure that the project team stays aligned with where we're headed as an organization. And then finally, we also have to make sure that executives are keeping the entire organization aligned, not just the project team, not just at the executive level, but also at the front line level. All the different stakeholders, employees that are going to be affected by the changes that come from this transformation, they need to be aligned as well. And the leadership needs to start at the top. And the leadership within the organization needs to set the tone and the vision to the entire organization so that the entire organization is in sync and aligned. And to the extent that there is misalignment, or there's resource shortages, or there's something missing from the project, it's up to the executive team to make sure that the project team has what they need in terms of budget, resources, time, or whatever it is. And that's why executives need to be so actively involved in these projects for them to be successful. So I hope you found this information useful. I hope it gives you some direction on what executives' roles should be during a project. If you're not an executive, I encourage you to share this video with your executive team to help them understand better what to expect during a project like this. And if you'd like to learn more about digital transformation best practices and what to expect during a transformation, I encourage you to read our annual digital transformation report. We publish it each year. Contains a number of best practices and lessons from having helped so many organizations through their digital transformations over the years. It also contains a number of independent reviews, rankings, and technology comparisons for different providers in the marketplace. So I encourage you to download that. You can find that by scanning the QR code in front of you, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful, and hope you have a great day. Now, the executive, the executive steering committee vision of how they need to fill blah, 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 decisions that are made and how they deploy technological. Now, the final big role that executives, wow.